The Witcher Season 3 is out in full on Netflix. It was released in 2 batches. First 5 episodes at once, and then the final 3 after a couple of weeks. It's infamously the final season for Henry Cavill, who left the production after shooting this season as a result of creative differences between him and the writing team. It's not that difficult to work out that he, as a massive nerd and fans of the books and games, was pushing for a more faithful adaptation of the source material, whereas the showrunner and the writer, well, the writers, they did what they did. So I watched this season sort of despite myself, despite my best judgment. I thought season 1 was relatively okay, but then season 2 was just egregious in how much it butchered the story from the books and just how poorly made it was, even as a standalone property. Pretty much the same can be said about season 3, with one slight difference. I think season 2 seemed like the writers have never actually read the books and were just told the general ideas about them, and then they sort of made up their own shit. Whereas in season 3, it's very clear that this time they at least did read the source material, but didn't understand any of it. They didn't understand how the books were in so many ways challenging the established fantasy tropes and going against them, and they made the show very juvenile, with most of the challenging being just the constant swearing and forced gay romance and stuff like that. They didn't understand how the female characters in the books were great because they were flawed, because they were nuanced, and because they eventually overcame their struggles. Instead, the writers made every single woman in the show a stereotypical girl boss, and the entire world basically revolves around them. They didn't understand the way that the books explored the dirty politics and high stakes games between the kingdoms, instead trying to make everything about Ciri being the chosen one, and all the political big players talk very seriously but not actually do that much. I mean, the simplest example of completely missing the point of something from the books comes already in episode 1 of this season, which tries to adapt the dear friend letters between Yennefer and Geralt. The way that's done feels just cringy, cheap, and straight up nonsensical. Straight up nonsensical, excuse me. And I think it's a perfect example of how, again, the writers saw an element in the books and they just adapted it without understanding what purpose it was fulfilling in the source material. In that way, I no longer think that this is an example of bad adaptation where the writers simply ignore the source material. No, I think it's worse by now. It's an example of cultural vandalism where they just actively sabotage what was already working. To give you an analogy, it feels like if you took a classical painting and made graffiti all over it. I mean, regardless of the quality of the graffiti, you've still ruined something. And in this case, believe me, the quality of the graffiti is absolute dog shit. The politics are weak and stilted. The characters don't feel real and talk with a very stiff, sterile language, except for the part where they swear a lot for no reason. Ciri's actress, Freya Allan, is awful. I mean, I'm sorry. I know people were previously saying she was well cast, and I agree. She looks the part, but she cannot act convincingly. The vast majority of the mages and sorceresses has exactly the same problem. Jaskier only has one facial expression the whole season, which is that he's worried. The character arcs are completely whack, especially for Yennefer and Ciri, for Yennefer and Cahir, sorry, because the show tries to pivot them to make their storylines fit what was later on going on in the books, while still having to deal with what they've messed up about them so far, which means they have to do some ridiculous 180s. There is no sense of world building or scale or geography because everyone just teleports around the map, and it doesn't matter that the locations are half the world away. If anyone can be anywhere at any point in time, it's just a load of fucking garbage is what it is. And I feel bad for Cavill because it was a dream come true for him to play Geralt. He was, he was a big fan of the source material again, and he was a good fit for the role. And he's still doing a decent job in this season with the terrible writing he's given. And in the action fight sequences, I'd even say an incredible job still. But the showrunners and the writers decided to just actively sabotage a beloved book series for no reason, and the result is this. I know they already announced Liam Hemsworth would replace Henry Cavill for season 4, but honestly, with the ongoing strikes in Hollywood and the delays and the terrible reception of this season, I can totally see the show just never coming back again. And that's probably the best thing that can happen to it.